My wife has been cheating on me with a stripper since 2015. When she told me she was pregnant, I took a paternity test and found out that the child is not mine. Hey Reddit, I'm not even sure where to begin. I'm Jackson, 42, and right now, I feel like my entire world has been flipped upside down. What I thought was a happy marriage of 8 years is now riddled with doubt and betrayal. And it all started with an old external drive I found last week. So, let me set the scene. I was cleaning out the office closet, a task I'd been putting off for years, and I came across this dusty external hard drive. It was one of those bulky, outdated ones from over a decade ago. I didn't think much of it at first, just plugged it in out of curiosity to see what was on it. It was mostly old photos, some work files, and random stuff. But then I stumbled upon a folder titled Vegas 2015. My heart sank before I even clicked on it because I knew that was the year Ashley, my wife, had her bachelorette party. I opened the folder and there it was, a video. It wasn't just a harmless recording of friends having fun at a nightclub, though. Nope. It was Ashley, my Ashley, sitting on a chair in the middle of a room, with a shirtless, muscled stripper grinding on her. At first, I thought, okay, it's probably just some goofy fun, nothing to overthink. But then things escalated. The stripper leaned in, and Ashley didn't pull away. She was smiling, laughing, and, God, I can't even say this without feeling nauseous. She kissed him. Twice. Not a peck, either. Full on. Lips locked, her hands on his shoulders. My stomach dropped. I couldn't even finish the video. I slammed my laptop shut and just sat there, staring at the wall like an idiot. When Ashley came home that evening, I didn't know how to bring it up. I paced around the living room for what felt like hours, trying to figure out the right words. Finally, I just blurted it out. I found a video of your bachelorette party. She froze, her keys still in her hand. What video? She asked, her voice suddenly high-pitched and shaky. That reaction told me everything I needed to know. The one where you're kissing a stripper, I said bluntly. I didn't want to sugarcoat it. Her face turned bright red, but I couldn't tell if it was from embarrassment or anger. She quickly set her bag down and crossed her arms. Jackson, that was years ago. It was a stupid one-time thing. It didn't mean anything, she said, her tone defensive. Didn't mean anything? I repeated, incredulous. You kissed another man, Ashley, on the night you were supposed to be celebrating marrying me. How is that supposed to mean nothing? She sighed heavily and ran a hand through her hair. It was a bachelorette party, okay? It's what people do. The girls hired a stripper as a joke. I had a little too much to drink, and things got silly. But it didn't go any further than that. I swear. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But the way she brushed it off, like it was no big deal, made my blood boil. Silly? I shot back. You're calling making out with a stranger in front of your friend silly? Ashley rolled her eyes, which only added fuel to the fire. Jackson, you're blowing this way out of proportion. It was 8 years ago. Why are you even digging this up now? I wasn't digging for anything. I yelled. I found the video by accident. And honestly, I wish I hadn't. Because now I can't unsee it. She started pacing, muttering under her breath about how ridiculous I was being. That's when I asked her point blank. If it didn't mean anything, why didn't you ever tell me about it? Her response was instant. Because it didn't matter. Why would I bring up something that's stupid and insignificant? I knew you'd overreact, and guess what? I was right. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You lied to me, Ashley. By not telling me, you lied. You let me marry you without knowing this. She rolled her eyes again and threw up her hands. Oh my God, Jackson. Are you seriously going to let one dumb mistake ruin everything? I love you. I've always loved you. That night doesn't change that. Her words sounded convincing, but my gut told me there was more to the story. Was it just the kiss? I asked, my voice quieter now but still firm. Yes, she exclaimed. For God's sake, yes. Nothing else happened. I wouldn't cheat on you. I wanted to push further, but honestly, I was exhausted. My emotions were all over the place. Anger, sadness, confusion. I decided to let it go for the night, but not because I believed her. I just needed time to process. Over the next few days, things were tense. Ashley acted like everything was fine, like we'd moved past it, but I couldn't shake the image of her with that stripper. I kept replaying the video in my head, over and over. Her smile, the way she leaned into him. It didn't look like someone who felt guilty or regretful. I started noticing little things, too. The way she avoided eye contact when I brought it up again. How she'd get defensive anytime I asked even the simplest questions. I couldn't tell if I was being paranoid or if there really was something she wasn't telling me. Either way, I felt like I was going crazy. Hey Reddit, it's me again. I wish I could say things have gotten better since my last post, but if anything, they've gotten worse. A lot worse. If I thought finding that video was the most shocking thing to happen, I was dead wrong. What I've been dealing with these past few weeks has left me questioning everything I thought I knew about my wife and my marriage. After the fight over the bachelorette party video, things between Ashley and me were strained, to say the least. I couldn't get over it. Every time I looked at her, all I could see was the woman in that video, kissing a stripper like she didn't have a care in the world. The trust was gone. Completely gone. And once trust is broken, everything else starts to fall apart. At first, I tried to keep my suspicions in check. I told myself it was just the aftermath of the video and that I needed to give myself time to heal. But Ashley wasn't making it easy. Her behavior started changing, and not in a good way. She was out late almost every other night, coming home after midnight with vague explanations like, "I was just catching up with friends," or "we lost track of time." When I asked her who she was with, she'd shrug and say something like, "You don't know them, just some old work friends." The thing is, Ashley used to be all over social media. If she so much as went out for coffee, there'd be a picture of her latte with some cutesy caption. But now? Nothing. No photos, no tags, no posts about fun nights with the girls. It was like she didn't want anyone to know where she was, or who she was with. One night, around 12:30 a.m., I heard her come in. I was already in bed but wide awake, pretending to sleep. She tried to tiptoe into the bedroom, but I couldn't hold it in anymore. "Where were you?" I asked, my voice sharp in the darkness. She sighed like I was the one inconveniencing her. "Out," she said flatly, slipping off her shoes. "Out where?" I pressed, sitting up. "With friends, Jackson," she snapped. "Why do you always have to interrogate me?" "Because you're acting sketchy as hell," I fired back. "You're never home. You don't tell me anything. And you think I'm just supposed to sit here and not wonder what's going on?" Her eyes flashed with anger. "Maybe if you trusted me, we wouldn't have this problem. Maybe if you were trustworthy, I wouldn't have to ask." I shot back. That ended the conversation. She grabbed a blanket and stormed out to the couch, slamming the door behind her. The next day, I decided we needed professional help. If we were going to survive this, we couldn't do it on our own. I suggested marriage counseling, expecting her to argue, but to my surprise, she agreed almost immediately. I thought maybe that meant she cared enough to try, but looking back, I think she just wanted to shut me up. We found a therapist named Dr. Howard, an older guy with a kind face and a calm demeanor. During our first session, I laid everything out. The video, the lies, her strange behavior. Ashley sat there, arms crossed, looking bored. When it was her turn to talk, she said, "I feel like Jackson is punishing me for something that happened years ago. I've apologized, but he won't let it go." "Have you apologized?" I asked, turning to her. "Because all I remember is you brushing it off like it was nothing." She rolled her eyes. "I shouldn't have to grovel over something that didn't even matter." Dr. Howard jumped in, trying to mediate. "Ashley, it sounds like Jackson is looking for acknowledgement that your actions hurt him. Do you feel regret for what happened?" She shrugged. "I guess. But I don't see why it's such a big deal. Everyone does stupid things at their bachelorette party." Her tone was so dismissive, it made my blood boil. "Everyone doesn't kiss a stripper, Ashley," I snapped. "Stop acting like this is normal." Dr. Howard tried to steer the conversation back to productive territory, but the session ended with more tension than it began. And that set the tone for the next few weeks of therapy. Every time we went, Ashley acted like it was a waste of time. She refused to take any responsibility, insisted I was overreacting, and showed zero remorse. Meanwhile, her late-night outings continued. I started keeping track, writing down the times she left and the times she came back, trying to find some sort of pattern. But it was all over the place. Some nights she'd leave at 6 p.m., others at 10. Sometimes she'd be gone for just a couple of hours. Other times, she wouldn't come home until 2 a.m. And every time, her excuses were the same vague nonsense. Out with friends. I started noticing other things, too. She was constantly on her phone, texting someone with a little smirk on her face. When I asked who it was, she'd say, just the group chat. But she never let me see her screen. She also started dressing up more, tight dresses, high heels, full makeup. It was a far cry from the sweatpants and ponytails she used to rock on a regular basis. When I asked why she was getting so dressed up just to see friends, she rolled her eyes and said, "God, Jackson, do you want me to look like a slob?" One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to follow her. She left around 8 p.m., saying she was meeting Megan and Sarah, two friends I'd met maybe once at a work event years ago. I waited about 10 minutes, then got in my car and drove after her. She headed downtown and parked near a Trini bar. I watched from a distance as she walked in, her heels clicking against the pavement. I waited for about 20 minutes before going in myself. The place was packed, dimly lit with loud music. I scanned the room, trying to spot her, and finally saw her sitting in a booth near the back. But she wasn't with Megan or Sarah, or any women, for that matter. She was with a guy. Tall, dark-haired, mid-30s, wearing a suit. They were leaning in close, talking and laughing like old friends, or maybe something more. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I wanted to march over there, demand answers, but I held back. I didn't want to make a scene. Instead, I stayed near the bar, watching them from a distance. They talked for over an hour, their heads almost touching at times. Then, around 10 p.m., they got up and left together. I followed them outside, keeping my distance. They walked down the street to a nearby hotel. My heart was racing, my palms sweating. I felt like I was going to throw up. They stopped outside the entrance, and for a moment, I thought maybe they'd just say goodbye and go their separate ways. But then he leaned in and kissed her, and she kissed him back. "Hey Reddit, it's me again." I wasn't planning to post an update so soon, but something big happened, and I need to get it off my chest. Ashley dropped a bombshell this week, and honestly, I don't even know how to process it. It started a few days ago. Things between us had been tense, as usual. I was still reeling from what I saw at the hotel, but I hadn't confronted her about it. Part of me didn't want to deal with the inevitable fight, and another part of me, well, I guess I was still holding out hope that I was wrong. That maybe there was an explanation, no matter how unlikely that seemed. Anyway, Ashley was acting strange, even by her recent standards. She was quieter than usual, avoiding me more than ever. Then, out of nowhere, she said, "We need to talk." Those 4 words instantly set off alarm bells in my head. She sat me down in the living room, fiddling with her hands like she was nervous. For a second, I thought she was finally going to confess to everything. But instead, she blurted out, "I'm pregnant." I froze. Pregnant? I didn't even know how to react. My first instinct was to feel happy. I mean, isn't that what you're supposed to feel when your wife tells you something like that? But then the doubts crept in. After everything that had happened, how could I be sure the baby was mine? Still, I didn't let any of that show. I forced a smile and said, "Wow, that's amazing news." She looked relieved, like she was expecting a different reaction. We hugged, and for a moment, I let myself believe that maybe this could be a turning point. Maybe the baby would bring us closer together, fix what was broken. But as the days went on, that hope started to fade. I couldn't stop thinking about the guy from the bar, about the way they laughed together, how she kissed him without hesitation. And now she was pregnant? The timing couldn't have been worse, or more suspicious. A few nights later, I decided to bring it up in the most casual way I could manage. "So," I said over dinner, "how far along are you?" Ashley looked up from her plate, a flicker of something, panic, crossing her face. About 6 weeks," she said, too quickly. 6 weeks. I did the math in my head. That lined up with when she started her late-night outings. My stomach turned. "That's great," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Have you been to the doctor yet?" "Not yet," she admitted. "I was going to make an appointment this week." That struck me as odd. Ashley was usually meticulous about these things. When we talked about having kids in the past, she'd gone on and on about how important prenatal care was. But now, when it was actually happening, she seemed indifferent. I didn't push it, though. I didn't want to raise any red flags. If I was going to figure this out, I needed to play it cool. The next day, I did something I never thought I'd do. I called her best friend, Mia. Mia and Ashley had been inseparable since college, and if anyone knew what was really going on, it was her. I told her I wanted to plan something special for Ashley to celebrate the pregnancy and needed her input. It was a lame excuse, but it got Mia talking. She must be so excited, I said, trying to sound upbeat. Yeah, Mia replied, but her tone was off. Hesitant. She hasn't said much about it, though. Honestly, I was surprised when she told me. I didn't even know you two were trying. That caught me off guard. We weren't, I admitted. It just happened. There was a long pause on her end. Then she said, well, I'm sure everything will work out. Her words sounded supportive, but there was an edge to her voice that made me uneasy, like she was holding something back. Before I could press her, she made an excuse to hang up. Over the next few weeks, Ashley's behavior got even stranger. She was still going out late, though less frequently. When she was home, she was distant, spending most of her time in the bedroom or on her phone. I tried to bring up the pregnancy a few times, asking if she'd scheduled her doctor's appointment or thought about baby names, but she always brushed me off with vague answers. One night, I decided to look through her phone. I know it was a violation of her privacy, but I was desperate. While she was in the shower, I unlocked it. Thankfully, she hadn't changed her passcode, and started scrolling through her messages. Most of them were harmless, chats with friends and coworkers. But then I saw a thread with someone saved as T. My heart raced as I opened it. The messages were flirty. Nothing outright incriminating, but enough to make my stomach churn. Can't wait to see you again, he'd written a few weeks ago. Last night was amazing. She'd replied with a heart emoji. I took screenshots and sent them to my email, then deleted the evidence from her phone. When she came out of the shower, I acted like nothing was wrong. But inside, I was falling apart. The next day, I called the number listed under T. I didn't say anything when he picked up, just listened. His voice was deep, confident. Hello? Who is this? He said. I hung up without answering. I spent the rest of the day spiraling. Was this guy the father of Ashley's baby? Did she even know for sure? The thought made me sick, but I couldn't confront her. Not yet. If I was wrong, it would destroy whatever was left of our marriage. And if I was right, well, I wasn't ready to deal with that either. I decided to wait until after the baby was born. As much as it killed me, I couldn't risk stressing Ashley out during the pregnancy. If the baby was mine, I didn't want to do anything that might put them in danger. But I made a plan. As soon as the baby arrived, I'd demand a paternity test. And if the results confirmed my worst fears, I didn't know what I'd do. So now I'm in limbo, pretending everything's fine while my mind races with worst-case scenarios. Ashley seems oblivious, going about her days like nothing's wrong. But I can't shake the feeling that she knows more than she's letting on. That she's hiding something big. Hey Reddit, it's Jackson again. I've been putting off writing this update because, honestly, I didn't know how to put everything into words. But now that the dust has settled, at least for now, I feel like I owe it to myself to get this out. The baby was born last month, a little boy we named Ethan. He's perfect. Absolutely perfect. When I held him for the first time, I felt a wave of emotions I wasn't prepared for. Love, pride, fear, and, most of all, doubt. I couldn't stop wondering if he was really mine. But in that moment, I pushed all those thoughts aside and focused on him. This tiny human who didn't ask to be brought into this mess. Ashley, on the other hand, seemed distant. She went through the motions, feeding him, changing him, but there was a detachment I couldn't ignore. At first, I thought it was just postpartum exhaustion, but something about it felt off, like she was carrying a secret she wasn't ready to share. A week after Ethan was born, I brought up the idea of a paternity test. I tried to frame it delicately, saying it was just for peace of mind, but Ashley's reaction was explosive. "Are you kidding me?" she shouted, her face red with anger. "How could you even suggest that?" He's your son, Jackson. I just need to know for sure, I said, trying to stay calm. After everything that's happened, can you really blame me? She stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. For the next 2 days, she barely spoke to me, but I didn't back down. I told her I was going to do the test with, or without her permission. She finally relented, but not without throwing a few more accusations my way. You're going to ruin this family over your paranoia, she spat. I hope you're happy. I swabbed Ethan's cheek and sent the sample off to the lab. The wait for the results was excruciating. Every time I looked at him, my heart broke a little more. What if he wasn't mine? What would I do? Could I raise him, knowing he was the product of Ashley's betrayal? Or would I walk away, leaving him with a woman I barely recognized anymore? The results came in 2 weeks later. I opened the email alone in my office, my hands trembling as I clicked on the attachment. The words were clear. Probability of paternity, 0%. I stared at the screen, the air leaving my lungs like I'd been punched in the gut. My worst fear had been confirmed. Ethan wasn't mine. That night, I confronted Ashley. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, when I walked in with the printed results. Care to explain this? I asked, holding up the paper. Her face went pale. She set her phone down slowly, her eyes darting to the test results and then back to me. Jackson, I can explain. Don't. I cut her off. Don't insult me by pretending there's an explanation that makes this okay. She started crying, big, dramatic sobs that might have moved me if I wasn't so angry. It was a mistake, she said, her voice shaking. I didn't mean for this to happen. Who is he? I demanded. Who's the father? She hesitated, wiping her tears with the sleeve of her sweater. His name is Michael, she finally said, barely above a whisper. He's someone I work with. Michael. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. I knew the name. Ashley had mentioned him before, casually, in passing. He was her coworker, someone she'd been working with for years. I never thought twice about it. Never suspected a thing. How long? I asked, my voice cold. She looked down at her hands, unable to meet my gaze. It happened during that rough patch we had a few years ago, she said, when we were fighting all the time. I felt alone. Michael was there, and one thing led to another. One thing led to another? I repeated, my voice rising. That's your excuse? You cheated on me because you felt alone? Do you have any idea what you've done? She started crying again, but I didn't care. I was too angry, too hurt. Was it just once? I asked. Or was it more than that? It was more than once, she admitted, her voice barely audible. But it ended. I ended it. I swear. I didn't believe her. Not entirely. Does he know? I asked. Does Michael know about Ethan? She hesitated again, and that was all the answer I needed. Oh my God, I said, running a hand through my hair. You told him before you told me, didn't you? He deserved to know, she said, her voice defensive now. He's Ethan's father. And what about me? I shouted. Did I deserve to be lied to? To be made a fool of? You let me believe he was mine, Ashley. You let me bond with him, love him, and now you're telling me it was all a lie. The fight lasted for hours, going in circles until we were both too exhausted to continue. She tried to apologize, but her words felt hollow. She said she didn't want to lose me, that she still loved me, but I couldn't even look at her. I spent that night in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, replaying our conversation over and over in my head. Every time I thought about Ethan, my heart broke all over again. He didn't ask for this. He didn't deserve to be caught in the middle of this mess. But what was I supposed to do? Raise him as my own, knowing he wasn't mine? Or walk away and leave him to Michael and Ashley? The next day, I called in sick to work and drove to a park on the other side of town. I needed to clear my head, to figure out my next move. That's when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I should. Hello? I said. Jackson? A male voice replied. This is Michael. My blood ran cold. How did you get my number? Ashley gave it to me, he said. Look, I think we need to talk. We met later that day at a coffee shop. Michael was younger than me, maybe mid-30s, with neatly combed hair and a nervous energy about him. He looked like someone who spent more time in front of a computer than out in the real world. "I just want to say I'm sorry," he said as soon as we sat down. "I never meant for any of this to happen." "Yeah, well, it did," I said flatly. "What do you want?" "I want to do the right thing," he said. "I want to be a part of Ethan's life." His words hit me like a ton of bricks. "And what does that mean for me?" I asked. "Am I supposed to just step aside?" "I don't know," he admitted. I want to work something out. For Ethan's sake." Hey Reddit, it's Jackson. I'm back with what I hope will be my final update. Things have escalated in ways I couldn't have imagined, but for the first time in months, I feel like I'm finally getting my life back. Here's how it all went down. After learning the truth about Ethan's paternity and confronting both Ashley and Michael, I realized there was no way to salvage my marriage. The betrayal was too deep, the lies too many. I felt like a stranger in my own home, trapped in a situation I couldn't fix. So, I made the hardest decision of my life. I filed for divorce. I told Ashley the news one evening after Ethan had fallen asleep. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone as if nothing had happened, when I walked in and handed her the papers. "I can't do this anymore," I said. "This marriage is over." She stared at the papers in disbelief. "Are you serious?" she asked, her voice rising. "You're just going to give up? After everything we've been through?" "You mean after everything you put me through?" I shot back. "You lied to me, Ashley. You cheated on me. You let me believe Ethan was my son. How am I supposed to move past that?" Her face crumpled, but I wasn't buying it. "This isn't fair," she said, her voice shaking. "You can't just walk away." "Yes, I can," I said firmly. "And I will." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of meetings with lawyers, dividing assets, and trying to figure out how to untangle our lives. Ashley, of course, didn't make it easy. She fought me on everything, from the house to the furniture to the bank accounts. But the real battle started when it came to Ethan. Even though the paternity test proved I wasn't his biological father, Ashley demanded that I continue supporting him financially. "You've been his dad since day one," she argued. "You can't just abandon him." "I'm not abandoning him," I said. "But he's not my responsibility, Ashley. He's Michael's." Her eyes narrowed. "Michael can't afford to take care of him on his own. He's already paying child support for his other kid." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "That's not my problem," I said. "You made your choices, Ashley. Now you have to live with the consequences." Ashley didn't take no for an answer. She hired a lawyer, a sharp-tongued woman named Stephanie who seemed determined to wring every last dollar out of me. They filed a motion demanding $4,500 a month in child support, claiming that I'd established myself as Ethan's father and had a moral obligation to provide for him. When my lawyer, Ben, a calm, no-nonsense guy with decades of experience, saw the motion, he laughed. "They don't have a leg to stand on," he said. "The paternity test is ironclad. The court's not going to make you pay a dime." I wish I could say I was as confident as Ben, but the thought of facing Ashley and her lawyer in court made my stomach churn. Still, I knew I had to fight. I wasn't about to let her guilt me into paying for a child that wasn't mine. The court hearing was a nightmare. Ashley sat across from me, looking composed and confident, while Stephanie laid out her case. She painted me as a heartless man who was abandoning a child he'd loved and cared for since birth. "Ethan may not share Mr. Jackson's DNA," she said, "but that doesn't erase the bond they've formed. He's the only father Ethan has ever known." When it was Ben's turn, he calmly dismantled their arguments one by one. He presented the paternity test, highlighted Ashley's infidelity, and pointed out that Michael, as Ethan's biological father, was the one legally and morally responsible for his care. In the end, the judge sided with us. "While it's clear that Mr. Jackson has been deeply affected by this situation," she said, "the law is clear. He cannot be held financially responsible for a child who is not biologically his." Ashley looked devastated as the judge delivered her ruling, but I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. For the first time in months, it felt like I was finally free. Of course, Ashley didn't take the loss lying down. A few days after the ruling, she showed up at my house unannounced, Ethan in tow. "I can't do this alone," she said, tears streaming down her face. Please, Jackson. He needs you. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I looked at Ethan, who was sitting quietly in his car seat, clutching a stuffed animal. My heart broke for him. None of this was his fault, but I couldn't let Ashley manipulate me again. I'm sorry, I said, my voice firm but kind. But this isn't my responsibility anymore. You need to figure this out with Michael. She started sobbing, begging me to reconsider, but I stood my ground. After everything she'd put me through, I couldn't let her drag me back into her chaos. Since then, I've been focusing on rebuilding my life. I sold the house, moved into a smaller place across town, and started going to therapy. It hasn't been easy, but I'm finally starting to feel like myself again. As for Ashley, I heard through the grapevine that she's still trying to get Michael to step up and take responsibility for Ethan. I don't know how that's going, and honestly, I don't care. I've done my part. I've made my peace. Ethan will always hold a special place in my heart, but I can't be the one to raise him. I hope Ashley finds a way to give him the life he deserves. But for now, I'm moving forward, one day at a time. Hey Reddit, it's Jackson again. This will probably be my last update. I'm finally at a place where I can look back at everything with some clarity, and while it's been a hellish journey, I've learned a lot about myself and what I want from life. So here's how things unfolded after the divorce. After the court's decision, I moved out of the house Ashley and I shared. I found a modest, one-bedroom apartment in a quiet neighborhood about 22 kilometers away. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was mine, and that was all that mattered. I wanted a fresh start, a clean slate where I could rebuild my life without the constant reminders of everything that had gone wrong. Moving wasn't easy. Packing up years of memories, photos, furniture, little knickknacks we'd collected over the years, felt like ripping off a bandage that had been on for too long. I threw out most of the stuff that reminded me of Ashley. The wedding album? Gone. The souvenirs from our honeymoon? Donated. I kept a few things that were purely mine, like my old guitar and my collection of vintage vinyl records, but everything else had to go. The first few weeks in my new place were tough. The silence was deafening. I'd grown so used to the chaos of my old life that being alone felt strange, almost unsettling. But slowly, I started to adjust. I reconnected with old friends I'd neglected during my marriage, people like Eric, my college roommate, and Nathan, a coworker who'd always invited me out for beers after work, even when I declined. They were more than happy to have me back in their lives, and for the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't alone. I also threw myself into new hobbies. I started running in the mornings, something I hadn't done since my 20s. At first, I could barely make it around the block without wheezing like an old man, but I stuck with it. Within a few months, I was running 5 Burmese chots and feeling better than I had in years. I joined a local fitness group where I met people from all walks of life, single parents, retirees, college students, and their energy was infectious. It reminded me that there's so much more to life than the bubble I'd been trapped in. Ashley, meanwhile, wasn't doing so well. I'd heard through mutual friends that Michael, the biological father of Ethan, had transferred to another office in a neighboring state. Apparently, he wanted to start fresh, which was a nice way of saying he didn't want to deal with the mess he created. Without Michael's support, and without the financial safety net she tried to get from me, Ashley was struggling to make ends meet. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a little schadenfreude at first. After everything she'd put me through, it was hard not to feel vindicated. But that feeling didn't last long. When I thought about Ethan, it just made me sad. He didn't deserve any of this. He was an innocent child caught in the middle of a situation he didn't ask for. As much as I wanted to wash my hands of the whole thing, part of me still worried about him. But I knew getting involved again would only bring more drama into my life. Ashley tried to contact me several times after the divorce. She called, texted, even showed up at my apartment once. I didn't answer the door. Her messages were a mix of apologies, pleas, and angry outbursts. One day she'd beg me to come back, saying she'd changed and wanted to make things right. The next, she'd accuse me of abandoning Ethan and ruining her life. It was exhausting, even from a distance. Eventually, I blocked her number. It felt harsh, but I needed to protect my peace. I couldn't keep letting her pull me back into her chaos. She made her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. As time went on, I started to feel lighter, happier. I reconnected with my love for music, something I'd lost during my marriage. I dusted off my old guitar and started playing again, just for fun. I even joined a local band, playing gigs at small bars and coffee shops on weekends. It was nothing big, but it brought me joy, and that was enough. I also started traveling. Nothing extravagant, just weekend trips to nearby towns and national parks. I'd pack a bag, hop in my car, and drive with no real destination in mind. There was something freeing about being on the open road, with no one to answer to and no obligations weighing me down. One day, while grabbing coffee at a local cafe, I met someone. Her name was Lauren. She was funny, smart, and had a laugh that could light up a room. We hit it off right away, bonding over our shared love of hiking and terrible 80s action movies. It was refreshing to talk to someone who didn't know anything about my past, someone who saw me for who I was now, not who I used to be. We've been dating for a few months now, and while I'm taking things slow, I can honestly say I'm happier than I've been in years. Lauren knows a little about what I went through, but she doesn't pry. She respects my boundaries, and for the first time in a long time, I feel like I can breathe. As for Ashley, I don't know much about what's going on with her. The last I heard, she was working 2 jobs to make ends meet and trying to balance that with raising Ethan. It breaks my heart to think about him growing up in such a turbulent environment, but there's nothing I can do. I've made my peace with that.